We have amongst us some of what I would call the royalty of scholars of the Elizabethan, late Elizabethan period, the Roanoke colonization, and the efforts to settle this area of North America. I am not one of those. I am more of a pretender who has joined the royal circle. Or by the time I'm through, you may say that this is the court jester. But we will let you be the judge on that. This morning, I'm going to focus my time, on the writings, or more specifically, publications in various formats about the Roanoke colonization efforts. I'm going to talk just very briefly about Harriot and Debris. We've heard a lot about those, but then I'm going to take us in directions that I don't think the people who invited me necessarily expected, so it'll be a little bit of surprise maybe for them. Over the years, there have been hundreds, if not several thousand, publications related to the Roanoke colonization efforts. Some of them are fact-based, carefully researched, such as the publications that our scholars have been talking about or will be talking about during this symposium. Others are creative. Many are purely fantasy. But they are out there. When you go to gift shops, you can pull off publications for sale that have all kinds of theories about what happened to the lost colonists. You can also find things that are purely creative. And they're kind of fun, but it's a stunningly large body of literature related to the people and the events of a brief 7-year period. And so we're talking about from 1584 to 1590, essentially, that these writers and publicists have explored to give us all these publications. I want to start with a quote from David Beers Quinn, which I think summarizes very well. He tells us in Set Fair for Roanoke, the most enduring influence of the Roanoke Voyages was the literature that they left behind. That's really the evidence that we have. We're doing lots of archaeological digs and finding other things, but the accounts that Barlow created, that John White recorded, that Harriot recorded, that's really our source material for what we know for sure happened here according to their interpretations. We talked briefly some yesterday about Richard Hacklett. We need to start with him when we think about publications. As we heard, he was an ordained priest in the Church of England. He was, for a time, chaplain to the English ambassador at the French court, principal secretary of state to Elizabeth I and James I. And he was, for our purposes, we'll focus on that he was the promoter of English explorations and colonization, especially here in North America. And he was an author, editor, and translator. We heard some yesterday about the volume that he saw into print, Principal Navigations, Voyages, and Discoveries of the English Nation. This is a title page of it. Long title pages are much longer then. It was like to sell your books, you put everything on that title page. So they're kind of fun to look at. This is an example of the title page of the Principal Voyages. It includes accounts of various English explorations, not just to North America, but India, Syria, Arabia, Lapland. The third part focused on the journeys to Roanoke Island. The contents include Arthur Barlow's narrative of the 1584 exploration, the journal of 1585, of a participant in the voyage from Grenville, an anonymous account. Hacklett gives us the names of the Ralph Lane colonists and includes Ralph Lane's narrative about the 1585-86 colony. And then, thankfully, he gives us Thomas Harriot's A Brief and True Report of the Newfoundland of Virginia. Now that, as Dr. Fox told us yesterday, had been printed earlier, but was not in a large print run. So we owe it to Hacklett, and I like, Dr. Fox, your term, that he rescued Harriot's Brief and True Report for us, publishing it, and this publication, Principal Voyages, circulated widely among readers. Harriot, as we have heard, was an astronomer, mathematician, ethnographer, translator. He frankly is hard to describe. I think you would call him a true polymath. He was into everything, obviously a brilliant man. As I mentioned, his Brief and True Report was first published in small numbers in 1588, and then Hacklett included it in his 1589 publication, Principal Voyages. Here is a copy of the title page of that 1588, that rarity. If you have one at home, let me know, because we'd love to have it at Chapel Hill, but it's one of the few things that we don't have. And then, of course, although we know him best for his art, John White did keep an account of some of his experience here. He was the artist, as we know, of the colony and governor of the colony in 1587. Many thought, and Kim Sloan said this morning it's not necessarily so, that he traveled with Frobisher on a gold hunting expedition to Baffin Island in 1577. That's something that some for a long time have thought. But he did come to Roanoke Island in 1584, then returned with Ralph Lane, that colony, in 1585, and then as governor in 1587. And then he came back in 1590, attempting to locate the lost colonist. And as Kim has described so well for us, he made watercolor drawings, possibly for Walter Raleigh, perhaps for Queen Elizabeth or another patron, after he returned from that 1585-86 expedition. And as she discussed, there are several albums, there are several sets of these drawings. In her book, she talks about how there may have been some assistants who helped him with some copies. Their efforts now to try to determine which of those drawings actually were made by White and whether some might have been made by assistants. Her book is still available for purchasing. So if you are really interested in the John White drawings, Kim Sloan's book is well worth the cost. Okay, Fred, we may be at the next slide. We're not yet. Well, I'm not advancing. Let's see. Okay. Okay. These are, as Kim has gone into great detail about this, so I will not, but this is an original John White watercolor. Well, okay, and this is the village of Pomioc. And then, as we've heard this image discussed, we see the fishing. We learn about the canoe, the fishing style, but I think it also communicates to us with all these fish how prolific wildlife was here on Roanoke Island, and basically communicating you can come over here and you can get something to eat easily. You know, don't worry, which did not prove to be the case necessarily, but it's communicating to the Europeans who saw these images something about this area. We've talked about Theodore de Brie, the Flemish engraver who had fled continental Europe and had ended up in London, but he obtains a set of John White drawings and uses those to produce the engravings that appeared with Thomas Harriot's Brief and True Report. And as we heard yesterday, there were 4 editions, Latin, English, French, and German, that were published in Frankfurt. In part 1 in Debris, and then his sons picked up the series, the 13 volumes in the America series. We have a copy at UNC Chapel Hill we have several copies of the Debris volume, but we have it in Latin. Our former photographic archivist told me that if there was one thing that I could buy or steal or whatever, please get an English version, because all of the people who want to use the images want the title page in English. And of course, there are just not that many printed. I understand that maybe there were fewer printed copies in English than in some of the other languages. But in the volume, as I mentioned, Debris included engravings of John White's drawings. As Kim Sloan told us, those engravings have been used, those images, widely, the White images as engraved in publications about Native Americans, not just here from Roanoke Island, but as she said, the Hudson Valley and all over, because they're the best depictions of North American, Native American life early like that. Now, in 1940, the organization here on Roanoke Island, the Memorial Association, dissolved, making way for the newer Roanoke Island Historical Association. The Memorial Association transferred its property to the North Carolina Historical Commission, which became the North Carolina Office of Archives and History. It also transferred $1,479.12 to UNC Chapel Hill and 5 shares of insurance company stock for us in the North Carolina collection to focus on purchasing and preservation of books, pamphlets, manuscripts by or related to Sir Walter Raleigh, with preference to such materials dealing with the lost colony and prior expeditions sent by Raleigh to what is now North Carolina. We have a special book plate we put with the Raleigh materials. It's by the British artist Claire Leighton, who was briefly in the Triangle for several years and did several book plates for the other place, the dark blue place down the road, and then also for us at Chapel Hill. We've been faithful to that charge, and today our Raleigh collection holds 1,767 fully cataloged items relating to Raleigh or the efforts to establish colonies here at Roanoke Island. They're books, pamphlets, broadsides, maps, artifacts. We collect ephemera, like I'll take the program from this symposium and put in our box of ephemera so that scholars coming in will see some of the efforts to study the settlement efforts here at Roanoke Island, and the collecting interest continues. I'm going to shift a little bit now into some of the types of publications that we are seeing today. We've talked about the great scholarship that has been done. Fred? Okay, yeah. That we've had the narrative histories by academic scholars, great works, biographies of Raleigh. Mark Nichols had one a few years ago. Anna Beers, who spoke at a conference at Chapel Hill. Alan Galloway has one that we heard about yesterday. But the colonists are depicted in novels and in short fiction, in poetry and children's literature. You find lots of small pamphlets oriented toward children I'll talk about briefly. In speculative and fantasy fiction, in graphic novels. Now we're seeing ebooks and YouTube videos, audio files, MP3 music files that use what happened here creatively, very imaginatively, not necessarily accurately, but people are fascinated with what happened here on Roanoke Island and are offering their views or just playing around with the story. Okay, let me back up. We have very talented and accomplished academic scholars who are giving us these narrative histories and biographies. We have others we would call independent scholars, not necessarily affiliated with an academic institution or research repository. They offer their interpretations using those primary sources that I mentioned earlier that David Beers Quinn reminded us are what we know for sure about what happened here. This man did his new perspectives on the colonization. He's also given us his interpretation of Manteo and the Algonquians in the Roanoke Voyages. Others, such as Larry Tice, who's at the back with a copy of his book, have taken these older materials, such as hand-colored volumes of debris, where I think you said yesterday there may be 30 copies that you looked at, and he has examined how this is an original white watercolor, but then if you will look here, how a hand colorist came in, and you get a different impression. If you're looking at this book, you get a little bit different impression than if you're looking at the original John White. Much more. Here's the next one. I'm sorry, I keep hitting this. To me, this gives almost a tropical feel or a subtropical. A lot more lush vegetation and all. Very different, really. We have winter here on Roanoke Island, and all of this I think just gives you a different impression. Okay. Fred. Okay. Okay. Okay, if we could go to the next slide. Okay. I mentioned that you can find lots of publications for children in bookshops and in convenience stores. lots of people are making an effort to explain to children what happened here at Roanoke Island. Some of it is fact-based. You would rely on it. You would feel comfortable giving it to children or grandchildren. Others of it is not necessarily fact-based. This is a fairly recent Roanoke Island, the time that vanished. You see the white doe. We'll get to that in a minute, connected to the Virginia Dare legend. But when I looked at it, I looked at the title page, and you can't see this from here, but a member of the audience was a consultant. So we assume that this is fairly accurate. Eric Klingelhofer was a consultant with the author on this particular book oriented toward children. Okay, and images there. Of course, children respond to images as well as the text. This is the baptism of Virginia Dare, how the Native Americans cooked fish. And then the author shows us how we're trying to learn more about what happened to the lost colonists, the John White colony, by an image of an archaeological dig. There are other children's books that may be factually accurate, but in their illustrations, they may give a little bit misleading. I don't think archaeologists would agree or historians would agree that the city of Raleigh would have this type of development, but it works well visually on the cover of a book. The book itself has talks about the different theories of what happened to the lost colonists and has a helpful glossary in communicating to children about what was going on here, and then a timeline. Mysteries. Of course, these focus mainly on the 1587, the John White colony, the lost colonists, and lots of speculation on what happened. And mystery writers love to take this and tell us what happened in their mystery. So you can buy lots of mysteries of what happened to the lost colonists. This one offers suggestions, the solutions: destroyed by the Spanish, destroyed by Indians, removed into the Main, very plausible explanations of what might have happened. This is Mystery of the Lost Colony for fifth graders, a children's history book. And it suggests also plausible explanations of what happened. They might have been moved to Croatoan, the Spanish might have came. But in the illustrations, they say they moved into the Main, and they give us an image of the mountains, which I don't think there's much suggestion that they moved that far west. But it visually is very attractive. So we have, I think Scott Dawson is here, or will be here today. I think he's on the program, but he's done a book for children oriented for children on Manteo. It offers simple words and phrases in Algonquian language. Coloring books, they're out there and have been out there for a good while. 1952, we have a children's coloring book on the lost colony with images for them to use their crayons to color in. Here is presumably Manteo bowing before Queen Elizabeth, who's smoking a pipe of tobacco. And then we have the flora, fauna images for the children to color. In 1966, another coloring book out there, again with images for the children to color. And this is educating them about what might have happened here according to the producers of this children's book. In more recent years, we're finding online publications. I've used publications with quote marks there. I'm still a print person myself, but oops. Okay. Could we go back, Fred? Okay, yeah. This is for $3.50. You can have online access to 7 images relating to the lost colony that you can color in, and it's produced by some group, teachers.pay.teachers.com. So you need your credit card and charge, and it claims to have 1.3 million followers. Now, I don't know how you verify that, but fiction. lots of fiction about what happened to the lost colonies. Of course, we also have fiction related to the Ralph Lane colony. Inglis Fletcher, I believe, did a volume in her Colonial North Carolina series on Ralph Lane, but the lost colonies gets a lot of the attention. But this actually is a fairly recent book that is the year before the Armitage and Barlow showed up. And it's kind of a modern theme. The sister of Wan Cheese, or Wan Cheesy, as Karen Kupperman was saying yesterday. She's kind of an assertive young woman, and a fiction writer decided that he or she would tell us about the sister. Now, whether there was an actual sister or not, I don't know. I don't remember the name before, but lots of fiction has been produced and is being produced. Poetry. Many of you may remember William S. Powell, Bill Powell, who did a lot of research, the Paradise Preserved volume for the association here. His son Charles, I believe, was here yesterday, maybe here today. Over here, good. I wish your parents could be here. They would. In the 1980s, when we were having the America's 400th anniversary commemoration, a committee proposed and succeeded in getting a number of publications relating to Roanoke Island. Well, Bill and Virginia Powell just scoured all kinds of resources for poetry relating to Roanoke Island or the participants in the colonization efforts. And this book is still available, but came out in 1988. And here's just a contents page. You see Henry Wadsworth Longfellow giving us a poem about Humphrey Gilbert. Let's see if I can go back. Yeah, oops. Okay, yeah. William Carlos Williams' poem about Sir Walter Raleigh. There are poetry being published today relating to the Roanoke colonization period. I mentioned the White Doe. This is actually a narrative poem. It's not, Sally Southall Cotton was not the first user of this legend of Virginia Bear being turned into a white doe, but widely circulated, and this image has been picked up by lots of artists, lots of authors. This is just a page of the poem. Now I'm going to move into, this is where we maybe get into the court jester bit. Zombies. They were here. Speculative history, fiction, it's out there. Speculative fiction here. Here is where the immortal alien probe Prometheus comes and has an encounter with Manteo. Oops, okay, if we could. This is actually an online or an ebook, a Kindle edition. For 99 cents, you can buy access. And Prometheus the last line you can't read, can he remain silent despite its directive if he doesn't agree with Manteo, one thing. So I don't know I haven't read this. I'm tight. I haven't given 99 cents to look at this. But this is the stuff out there that is getting the lost colony known, sometimes accurately, sometimes not accurately. But it's great publicity for the lost colony and Roanoke Island. And so here's a zombie story, also a Kindle edition. And this is the one where redcoats are the zombies who show up and apparently invade. Again, I haven't purchased it. Now, Alex Klingelhofer, if Eric kind of needs something to do one day and you need to get him out of your hair, you can send him online, and for 99 cents, he can listen to MP3 music on the Roanoke colony. Or if he doesn't like that tune, he can go to the Roanoke Colony Zombies, another digital file of music. There are serious online examinations of what happened at the Roanoke colonies. This is produced by National Geographic. It's not quite 4 minutes long. I have listened to this. It is a very serious, rather scholarly discussion of what took place here, what's known to have taken place here. There's narration, aerial views of the site, music. It claims to have 479,000 views since June of 2018, not quite 330 views per day of this site. Then there is the BuzzFeed, which is, I'm not into this. I've spent a lot of work looking at some of this stuff online. It's been fun. But a BuzzFeed supernatural series, 20-some minutes in length, that claims to have had 13 million viewers. Two young guys, most people on the planet now are younger than I am, but they are battling wits. But they tell the story fairly straightforward for the first, and review first three theories, that the colonists were killed by Native Americans or assimilated with a local tribe or moved inland. Then the last two, they get rather playful. Brent Lane should know that the patch on the map indicated where the aliens from outer space landed and took the lost colonists away with them. And then the zombies come and bring a plague of cannibalism to Roanoke Island. There is a site, or was a site a few years ago in Orlando, Florida, where there is a demonstration of cannibalism relating to the colony, where I don't know how much it cost, but the video of it has been viewed a number of times, 14,000 views since 2014, or so claimed by the producers. Marvel Comics produced 8 comic books relating to Virginia Dare that were later compiled in a single volume called 1602. Virginia Dare has supernatural powers, and she somehow ends up in London along with her Native American bodyguard. She eventually returns back to Roanoke Island, but she has some interesting adventures in London. Pre-publication sales of that first issue, so the publicist claimed, 150,000 copies. And the publicist, quoting, combines classic Marvel action and adventure with the historically accurate setting of Queen Elizabeth's reign. It doesn't say the storyline is accurate, but says the setting is accurate. So we did acquire a copy a few years ago. I said, I'm curious about this Virginia Dare, who somehow ends up in London and back and forth. But a couple of sample pages from it. She's the blonde, blue-eyed girl here. And then this is not necessarily Sir Walter Raleigh, but the person is offering the head of her husband that you know him. And of course, Raleigh was not executed until a number of years later. But that theme of beheading comes through in this Marvel Comics. And it is, let me go back to that slide. Entertainment Weekly reviewed the book and called it a triumph. The Marvel Universe hasn't been this engaging in ages. So if you know people interested in comics, you might want to try to find 1602 in the series. Now I want to move toward the end. I'm probably running out of my time, but digitization is offering us new ways to get access to materials. Those accounts that Barlow and Harriot and White kept, you can go online now and find those for free. A lot of libraries and archives are digitizing and making those available, so you can do your own research. If you're inspired to give us a creative interpretation, have at it. You can also, with even some of the scholarly books that I think we're hearing about this yesterday and today, a lot of those are available for ebook purchase or access. And so I'd encourage you to look at those if you're not able or don't want to necessarily to purchase the print book. But ebooks are becoming quite popular. They're often keyword searchable and quite fun to play around with. Now, in the 1980s, we had a playful writer of materials oriented toward children. And when she did a lot on North Carolina history, thousands of books. She basically produced them at home, and some are almost mimeographed with stapled together. But this is her one focused on the lost colony, and she gave it the title that I think might be a good way to end. Next time, say where you're going if they had told us that, we would not necessarily be here today, but we'd be doing other things, and we'd also be interested in the Roanoke colonies. So thank you for your time. Thank you.